I always think back to the early 2000s when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! And just how crazy that was. It was a brand new franchise, and we had all these cool cards we were seeing for the first time. Things like Dark Magician and Blue Eyes and Exodia and Pot of Greed, cards we still talk about almost 20 years later. However, I feel like there are tons of other iconic cards from that time period that have a rich history, and even though they do sometimes get talked about and people do fondly remember them, I feel like the spotlight is on other cards of that era. One of those cards was Summoned Skull. So this is a card that was used by the main protagonist, Yugi, in the original anime, and it was a prominent feature on tons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Merchandise over the years. Summoned Skull was on t-shirts, it had action figures, it had statues, it had Hot Wheels cars. Summoned Skull was one of the most iconic monsters from old school Yu-Gi-Oh! But I feel like nowadays people aren't really talking about this monster that much. In the TCG, Summoned Skull has 3 different artworks and also has 9 different upgraded versions of itself that it's gotten over the years. In today's discussion, the first episode in a new series that I call Yu-Gi-Oh! Icons, I want to talk about the history of all of these different Summoned Skull cards and sort of talk about the impact that Summoned Skull had on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. Pretty much for as long as Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been around, so has Summoned Skull. It was in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, it was in the Bandai version of the game, it was in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, as I already mentioned. This card has always been a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just in case you don't already know, or maybe you forgot about it, Summoned Skull is a level 6 Dark Fiend monster. It's a normal monster, so no effect. It has 2,500 attack points and 1,200 defense. The flavor text says a fiend with dark powers for confusing the enemy. Among the fiend type monsters, this monster boasts considerable force. And it does have a little bit extra on here that makes it count as an Archfiend card in all situations, even though it doesn't have Archfiend in the name. For a while, this was not written on the card and you just had to know it as a ruling, but eventually they did put it on the real card. There are other cards like this, such as Axe of Despair, but yes, Summoned Skull does count as an Archfiend card for all of your other Archfiend support cards, and we'll see multiple times here that there have been different variants of Summoned Skull that are also part of the Archfiend archetype, but in those cases they're usually more direct. As you probably already guessed, this happened because of a mistranslation issue. This thing was always supposed to be part of the Archfiend cards, but when it was translated into the TCG initially, they did not put that in the name, and then it ended up mattering a lot more in the future. So to get around that, instead of changing the name of this iconic monster, they put that in the description. Part of the reason I think that people remember this card so much, even if it's not as much as cards like Blue Eyes and Dark Magician, is that it was a common in starter deck Yugi, and it was one of the best cards in that initial starter deck. It was also printed as an ultra rare in Metal Raiders, which is a cooler high rarity form of this card. I did get an anniversary pack ultra rare back in the day in 2008, which was really cool and had an artwork that was similar to the original artwork in the manga, which was pretty exciting to see. Overall, Summoned Skull was a huge force to be reckoned with in many recess Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels, which is where a lot of players, myself included, probably remember it from. Technically, the first printing of Summoned Skull was as a promotional card in December of 2001 that Upper Deck Entertainment made, and then gave to Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG retailers to kind of show them what a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card was, but for most of the player base, the first time that they saw this would have been in that 2002 Yugi starter deck. That Yugi starter deck was released in March of 2002, and by September of that same year, we already had a new variant of the card, Toon Summoned Skull, which already kind of proved how iconic Summoned Skull was right out of the gate. While Toon Summoned Skull was very bad compared to the original Summoned Skull because original Toon decks were really terrible, at least it was a new variant of a card that people were already very excited to play. A little over a year later, in December of 2003, we got Skull Archfiend of Lightning in Dark Crisis. This was an ultra rare, it looked really cool, and it also solidified Summoned Skull as being part of the Archfiend archetype. Skull Archfiend of Lightning was not not very competitive. However, it did lay the initial groundwork for combining Summoned Skull with the Archfiend theme. Over the next few years, we saw tons of reprints for the original Summoned Skull, and in December of 2008, we got that really cool looking anniversary pack version of this card. Like I said, this was based on the original manga version of Summoned Skull. This was a pack where Kazuki Takahashi drew all of the artworks for the cards. There's tons of really cool looking stuff in that set, and I actually remember buying that way back in the day. It's a really cool product. But 2009 was really exciting for fans of Summoned Skull. We had 3 big releases for the card. So in March of 2009 in Crimson Crisis, we finally got the Magical Mist normal spell card imported from the OCG. This is a card that we had been waiting for quite a while, and to finally see it in the TCG was really exciting. A few months later, in July of 2009, we got a new artwork in Duelist Pack Yugi. This one was a lot closer to the artwork that we saw in the original starter deck Yugi, but it was in a different pose, which is kind of cool. Personally, I really do enjoy the original artwork from starter deck Yugi, and then probably after that I like the anniversary pack artwork, but this is still a pretty cool variant on a card that a lot of people love. I should also mention that in 2001 there was a different version of this card's artwork that was released in the OCG only. It was a big prize card from the Asia Championship in 2001, and there's only one known copy of it in existence. But in the TCG, we've never gotten this artwork on a Summoned Skull, so we only have the 3 artworks that I've already covered. And then in September of 2009, out of Ancient Prophecy, we got Archfiend Zombie Skull. While this card is technically part of the Archfiend archetype, because it does have that in the name, this was more just a zombie synchro monster that you could play with Plague Spreader Zombie. It's kind of hard to make. It's a level 6 synchro that takes 3 monsters at minimum, which means that you can't just pair Plague Spreader with like a level 4 monster, which would have been a lot better. Still, I know that fans of Summoned Skull were very excited to see yet another retrain of the iconic monster. We didn't get any Summoned Skull cards for a few years after that. It wouldn't be until December of 2013 when we got Archfiend Commander, and this was a really unique take on Summoned Skull. Once again here, we are seeing yet another Archfiend card, and this one really did work quite well with the other Archfiend cards, which was pretty nice. You can see the resemblance, and it does have the exact same stat line as the original Summoned Skull, like all of the other retrains do. But yeah, this was one of the most different takes on Summoned Skull that we had seen so far. Then in Clash of Rebellions in 2015, we got Red Eye's Archfiend of Lightning. So this is a Summoned Skull that's not only an Archfiend, but also part of the Red Eyes archetype. You could use it to summon the gigantic Archfiend Black Skull Dragon. It's like Skull Archfiend of Lightning, but it's black and purple, and it just looks gorgeous. This is probably one of my favorite artworks of any of these Summoned Skull variants. The card itself was very popular in Red Eye's decks, at least in the TCG, and while those decks were not very competitive, this card was a crucial piece to many of their early combos. We don't see a lot of Archfiend Black Skull Dragon or Red Eye's Archfiend of Lightning anymore, but for a while it was a strong choice and a fan favorite casual strategy. Then sort of out of nowhere in 2019, we got 4 brand new variants for Summoned Skull. These were all in Fists of the Gadget, a sort of not well received set, but these 4 cards were very unique. So we have 1 Xyz monster, 1 Ritual monster, 1 Synchro, and 1 Fusion. I'm not going to pretend like these cards are all fantastic monsters. They didn't really see any play, but they're all very cool upgrades of the original Summoned Skull, and I think they did a very good job of taking what made the original Summoned Skull so cool and then adapting it into these different card types. They're all level or rank 6, they all have the original stats of Summoned Skull, and you can do some pretty funny things if you actually go out and try to build a Summoned Skull deck. These cards never made a big impact on the TCG, but it was once again very exciting to see new versions of such an iconic monster from old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Interestingly, despite many of these cards having okay effects, none none of them were able to live up to the hype of the original normal monster. But I think it would be cool someday in the future to see a true Summon Skull deck, kind of like how they reinvented the Thunder Dragon card into an entire archetype. I think there are huge fans of Summon Skull out there. I know that anytime I feature it in a video, people get really excited, and I wanted to start off this new series at the beginning of 2021 with a monster that I myself am a huge fan of, and I think a lot of other people are as well. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm really excited about this new series. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and it's really cool to finally put out the first episode. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.